So tonight we'll be sharing some thoughts with Leo Hartong, who wrote a book entitled From Self to Self, a very nice gentleman that Evelyn and I had the pleasure of meeting in Amsterdam and had a nice little lunch with him. This book is actually a compilation of questions and answers of people who wrote to him after having read his first book entitled Awakening from the Dream, which many people found very helpful. And so I'll start with the introduction and then read a chapter or two. They're brief, as they are typically when it's in a question and answer format. You hold in your hand a compilation of expressions, questions, and answers that came about in response to the book, Awakening to the Dream. What is being communicated here is something immediate and simple. It's about who or what you truly are right at this instant. Paradoxically, it's also a mystery that can appear complex when the mind tries to catch it in a net of words and concepts. Let me say right from the start that such attempts will fail. For that reason, this writing does not claim to be an explanation, but it is presented as an exploration through a collection of pointers that rely on repetition and metaphor. Here is the first metaphor, in which this text is compared to a book about humor. Humor is a great topic. However, we can talk and write about it all we want, without ever taking hold of its essence, whereas merely telling a good joke at the right moment is humor. Of course, humor is not limited to telling jokes, and many pages can be filled in an attempt to grasp the ungraspable essence of humor. Such a book can promote laughter, but it cannot tell you how to get a joke. One either gets it or not. When one does not getting it, explaining the joke usually kills it. So what to do? Nothing. Or perhaps let's just tell some more jokes until one hits home. And this for no special reason. But if I have to give one, it would be that joy shared is joy multiplied. So here is a small joke / quote. Man will occasionally stumble over the truth, but most of the time he will pick himself up and continue on. Winston Churchill. Mm-hmm. The second metaphor, which is used repeatedly in this book, shows that something clear and simple can seem complex when we try to put it into words. The metaphor is space. It is clear and obvious as a direct experience, yet seemingly mysterious when we attempt to describe it. We could, for example, say that space is nothing, but that nevertheless all objective appearances depend on it. We could say that we see it everywhere, yet we could as easily describe it as invisible. We could say that it has no location, or we could say that it is everywhere, and that everything that has a location appears in it. As you see, this description is full of seemingly mutual exclusive observations, which make everything said here true and untrue at the same time. So everything appears in space, but where does space appear? It appears on, in, and as an expression of something even more subtle. The merest description that be given to this consciousness is that it is as fine, as subtle as space. In maturity, your consciousness is God. That's a quote from Nisargadatta. We give this subtleness names such as pure awareness, consciousness, essence, Tao, the supreme identity, God, the self, or simply it. The word it may seem to lack warmth or any other attribute, but it is precisely this lack that makes it such a good pointer. The mind finds it impossible to turn the word it into a picture, which is perfect, as it points here to the ultimate subject, which cannot be made into an object. The ultimate subject is the true identity, your, quote, in quotes, your original face or pure awareness. It is what you are, not just what you think you are. And like space, it is simple, clear, obvious, yet indescribable. Here are some other metaphors to help us point at the indescribable. We can learn to play the piano, but what that experience of music entails and what musicality actually is cannot be learned from reading. Also, we may know the taste of a peach, but we cannot tell this to someone who never ate one. Our words can guide the interested person to a fruit cellar or a peach tree, but only the tasting itself will answer her question. This text is pointing you to the metaphorical peach tree of what you truly are, but it does not claim to explain the taste of this essence. Once it is tasted, the pointers have served their purpose. One can then read books like this for the pleasure of reading or completely forget about them. And then a quote. The fish trap exists because of the fish. Once you've gotten the fish, you can forget the trap. The rabbit snare exists because of the rabbit. Once you've gotten the rabbit, you can forget the snare. Words exist because of meaning. Once you've gotten the meaning, you can forget the words. Where can I find a man who has forgotten words so I can have a word with him? And that's Chuang Tzu. And another quote I wanted to share with you. Since things neither exist nor don't exist, are neither real nor unreal, are utterly beyond adapting and rejecting, one might as well burst out laughing. Okay, so now this little chapter is called Splitting It. And the questioner has a very long question that I'm going to try to read and edit at the same time. But I think the point he gets to is interesting. He says, I have an intuitive sense that fundamental to sustaining the sense of being a separate individual is the tendency of the mind to split the whole of creation into a good and a bad side, where the one is wanted and the other is unwanted. This split manifests both in overt and subtle ways. Religions manifest the split in a very gross, in-your-face way. They divide life into good and evil, heaven and hell, sin and virtue. Many people have left this kind of gross splitting behind and have embarked on a so-called spiritual or psychological path of discovery. But the split continues. It continues in the more subtle manifestation of the same split, whereby the separate individual still tries to transform the unpleasant to get to a state that is more pleasant. The paradox, it seems to me, is that even in awakening, this split continues. It's not that we reach some ultimate state of pure, unconditional love where we have no more preferences. The character is part of the play and will continue having likes and dislikes. To put it bluntly, any human being will prefer a walk on a beautiful beach above a dark torture chamber. It's a lot easier to see the divine in the playful innocence of a little child than in a bloodthirsty rapist. So what actually changes? I cannot escape my preferences. I cannot escape the splitting. So to come back to my original point, yes, I sense that the mind sustains the sense of being a separate individual by splitting life into wanted and unwanted sides. But this seems inescapable. How can this ever resolve? And he answers, as Dogen has said, although everything has Buddha nature, we love flowers and we do not care for weeds. Preferences occur, as do apparent differences. Nothing but the absolute is absolute. And so, in day-to-day living, one man's weed appears as another man's flower. There is nothing that can or needs to be done about this. This manifestation, as seen from the mind, will always function within the pairs of opposites. As such, awakening is not an end to the show as it appears now. With awakening comes the recognition that there is no separate character to awaken, which makes this whole awakening thing a sort of a prank the self plays on the self. When the snake is projected onto the rope is still the rope. When multiplicity is projected on the one screen, it still is the one screen. As soon as it is clear that there really is no separate character, preferences, likes and dislikes are no longer seen as attributes belonging to someone who needs to resolve them. They're now recognized as some of the countless ways the one appears to itself, innumerable variations, but all on a single theme. In the body-mind, the natural functioning expresses as certain characteristics, which can be labeled as preferences. We could, for example, say that certain flowers grow best in the shade, while others do better in direct sunlight. We could express this same idea by saying certain flowers prefer the shade, while others prefer the sun. By exclusively identifying with the body-mind complex and its undeniable preferences, an artificial idea of a personal self having those preferences appears. But on closer look, is the center from which the questions and preferences are seen. This center is not a person, nor is it a thought or a state. We could point at it by calling it the unknowable knower, who has room for all characters, thoughts, and states. Because of its unconditional non-quality of limitless spaciousness, it has also been called, quote, pure, unconditional love, close quote. This, quote, something/nothing, something/no thing, has actually no attributes, not even pure, unconditional love. And it's absolutely zero to the mind. There are no handles on it, and it cannot be reached, much like you cannot reach the place where you are. All handles or labels are, as you pointed out yourself, steeped in duality, even the handle of awakening. They are all mind-generated, and on closer inspection, it can be seen that the mind itself is duality in action. Mm-hmm. The mind splits the capital one into the many, and even the concept I am implies a you are. Hmm. It is this mind that introduces the question how to resolve the splitting without realizing that it is the splitting. It is mind itself that generates all opposites, from the most obvious to the most subtle. In the Tao Te Ching, this splitting has poetically been called mutual arising. Quote, when everyone recognizes beauty as beautiful, there is already ugliness. When everyone recognizes goodness as good, there is already evil. To be and not to be arise mutually. Difficult and easy are mutually realized. Long and short are mutually contrasted. The nameless is the origin of heaven and earth. Naming is the mother of 10,000 things. Like fire cannot escape heat, the mind cannot escape the splitting it is. In the same way, the eye cannot escape preferences, as preferences are part of the conceptual eye structure. If there is an escape option at all, it is in the realization that no escape is needed, as this I is not all that I am. Naming is the origin of all apparent duality, and it is the way the game is played. Without this context, there would be no appearance of play at all. But regardless of how it appears, the origin of heaven and earth itself is never divided. Everything is already perfectly resolved in the single source from which this manifestation arises and to which it returns. A closing quote. As the rivers flowing east and west merge in the sea and become one with it, forgetting they were ever separate streams, so do all creatures lose their separateness when they merge at last into pure being. There is nothing that does not come from him. Of everything, he is the innermost self. He is the truth. He is the self supreme. You are that.
Whose quote is that?
That's from the Khandogya Upanishad. So, as you can see, this gentleman was also a student of Sailor Bob.
Oh, really?
Yes. And so he has that direct approach of looking exactly at what is. I'll read you this next section, and then we can talk about this. This little section is called the seeking curse. And the gentleman starts the question off by thanking him about the book he just read. And he says, it would appear that my mind, or rather the mind, is in a constant feedback loop. I understand and quite often notice that everything just arises in a space of awareness. But then the mind gets hold of it almost as soon as it happens and starts giving a running commentary or analysis on it. Oh, I wonder if this is awakening happening. Maybe it's just about to happen. That thing where everything jumps away and there's just this, close quote. The feedback loop continues as the mind catches the mind thinking about how this could be it, and then catches itself again thinking about how it just caught itself thinking about how this could just be it. And while this is going on, there's an underlying expectation that this really could be it. The difficulty is that I know I am powerless to seek or not seek this awakening thing. And I also know that this me seeking it and the frustration around that is just something else that arises in awareness, which the me is looking for. Ultimately, I feel I'm totally stuffed and sometimes wish I had never heard about any of this enlightenment stuff. This seeking is now like someone saying to you, just try not thinking about a big pink elephant with green dots, and you know what happens. You can't stop thinking about it. The answer, he says, to begin with the end of the question, you are not powerless to seek or not seek, because there is no such entity as a you to be powerless. There is only the one appearing as everything, including the mind, a possible sense of meanness and a feedback loop that cannot be stopped. Seeing that it cannot be stopped usually results in a search for solutions. However, it could also be seen as an invitation to find out whether there is really someone to stop it. If there is not, then there is no one in need of such a solution. On investigation, it may be discovered that the one bothered by this thought stream is itself a thought in that stream, and the wish for this loop to stop may turn out to be the very loop itself. Any attempt to switch to not wishing it to stop is still the same loop. It is working with the mind on the mind, and as effective as fighting fire with gasoline. So what to do? Perhaps it is possible to recognize that which is expresses as concepts in the mind and as stars in the firmament is not a concept that has to be gotten. It is not something happening to you, but it presently happens as you. It is what you are regardless of whatever thoughts are present. Trying to get out of this loop is the loop. It is perhaps possible to see through this double bind, just as you see that the instruction to not think about the pink elephant is in fact a flawed instruction. Although there is no one to do it, let it be. With this letting be and seeing through, the investment in the whole endeavor to get a non-existing me out of a non-existing problem may slow down of its own accord. Just as the investment drops away when one recognizes a mirage as a mirage. In this recognition, the mirage does not evaporate, but attempts to reach it or fetch water from it will stop on their own accord. Something sees the loop, something sees the mirage. This unseen seeing is out of the loop. When the idea persists that there is someone who might understand this, then take it as a clear clue that the essential point is missed by no one. This essential point is that there is no one doing or having such an understanding. When the falseness of the doer or possessor of understanding is seen, then it is clear that understanding simply is. Confusion, feedback loops, or whatever else arises does so of its own accord and is nothing but temporary stuff appearing on the awareness you are. Everything is it appearing to itself. The thought, this is it, or the thought, this is not it, are both it appearing as thought. There is no need to look for this awareness, as it is that which does the looking. That's why it is often said, you are what you seek. Light cannot shine upon itself. It is light. And the knowing that knows that you are cannot be known by a you as it is you. I am the knowing that knows. I am that I am. I am the knowing that knows. The mind may want to turn this description again into a prescription for getting it. But really, there is nothing to get, nor anyone to get it. It is being this, and no one can learn or teach being. It is what you are. It expresses as the mind in the thought I am. Or turn it around. This beingness is what the thought I am points to. In the same way as the word sweet points to something the tongue knows, but is incapable of capturing into words. Is sweetness not simple and obvious? And is it not impossible to describe what sweetness is to someone who has not tasted it? The good news is that you are this awareness, which can be pointed at by, but never captured in mind, words, or concepts. Presently, there is awareness of the reading of these words. As soon as this is mentioned, there is a recognition of this fact. This recognition is again seen in the awareness you are, and so on. It can never be grasped, as it is the very essence which allows the grasping to arise. It is the fingertip that cannot touch itself. It is the aware presence that is. It is that which knows the thoughts, but which itself is not a thought. It cannot be turned towards or away from. It cannot be turned towards or away from, as it is, It is that which knows the thoughts, but which itself is not a thought. It cannot be turned towards or away from, as it is the empty center around which everything turns. Here, now, presently, seeing the reading, seeing the thoughts that come up, including the idea of getting it or not getting it. This simple everyday awareness is it, regardless of the concepts that arise within it. Start here, stay here. This presence is it. Nothing to reach, nothing to add, nothing to get, and no one to get it. Just this beingness, appearing as everything and as you. It is you. You are it, and it is it. Quote, you impose limits to your true nature of infinite being. Then you get displeased to be only a limited creature. Then you begin spiritual practices to transcend these non-existent limits. But if your practice itself implies the existence of these limits, how could they allow you to transcend them? Ramana Maharshi. So he's constantly deconstructing our taken for granted belief in a separate self, right? Any reaction, guys? No.
Well, it's constantly about pointing to the realization that there is no me who could possibly awaken. So awakening really cannot happen because there's no one for it to happen to. And in a sense, you are already awake because the you that's truly awake is that pure awareness that never sleeps.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think it's interesting, yes, how he constantly points to that. Even when he talks about preferences, the likes and dislikes, because the one questioner was saying that that even an awakened person has likes and dislikes.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying, no, likes and dislikes appear, but they appear in and as awareness itself. That doesn't point to a me that has preferences.
It's a lot of stuff to try to grab a hold of. Like a real big bowl of noodles. You know, because you know, if you get into this non-duality stuff, what are they trying to do? It seems to me like at some point, I can't get away from this notion that you have to have a certain level, you've got to develop a certain level of understanding of how this comes to be. How do you come to be dual? Are you born dual? And you've got to have the understanding that this is an acquired thing. This is something that you build up. You're not born with an ego. You're not born with this dual sense. You learn it. It's a learned thing.
Okay, so Ugo, it's a learned thing. It's your conditioning. It's a product of
Right. It's the conditioning.
Okay, so he's suggesting a way to see through that conditioning, to see right through it, to deconstruct the whole conditioning. That's what this approach is. To deconstruct the central person who believes he's conditioned. So they're not going to tinker with changing the conditioning or altering the condition. They're going right. You're not going to trim the branches. He's going right to the taproot and saying there's no I that was ever conditioned.
He's pulling the plug on that me.
Hi, everybody. Can
Hi,
you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Hello, Chip.
I got here a little bit late. I just caught some of the end of it. Sounds brilliant. Who is this that we're listening to?
Okay. So this is a gentleman by the name of Leo Hartong.
Oh man, right on target, this guy.
The self, and the title of the book is From Self to Self.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah,
Love
and
it.
we were saying that Evelyn and I had lunch with him in Amsterdam
Oh, nice.
20 years ago. He's unfortunately deceased. And he wrote 2 books that I know of, this book and his first book, which was widely acclaimed, Awakening to the Dream. And we were saying that he's also, I think, a student of 2 people, Tony Parsons and Sailor Bob. So he takes this very direct Neo-Vedantin approach. And that's what I was just trying to convey to Ugo.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful writing. Sounds right in it.
Right.
Has it.
Yeah, I think he's spot on with the preferences as Evie just pointed to, that when we start this sort of non-duality game, we try, or at least I do, I'm going to try to be non-dual. I'm not going to have likes and dislikes. I'm going to be just right down the center all the time. And of course, you just sabotage yourself by doing that.
That's right.
It seems the instruction maybe is just to be aware of when these non-dual thoughts occur.
That's
choicelessly aware.
correct. Choicelessly aware that
Exactly.
these preferences are just appearances.
Let me just try 2 more pages.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's another gentleman who writes in about his frustration and says that He's been reading about awareness and observing for a long time. Ultimately, I get caught in the loop of my mind, trying to go beyond my mind, out of the ego. So nothing happens. I decided to put off the awareness until I die. Otherwise, it's too painful and I cannot cope with this life. And so Leo says to him, he says, the main thing to see is that there is no I to either get in or out of. It is also not your mind. It is just mind. Nor is it you that has to see this. There is just seeing without someone doing the seeing. The hierarchical structure of our language demands there be an I to do the seeing. And then it is forgotten that this I itself is nothing but language/thought. The I in I think has as much substance as the it in it rains. Observe and see that thoughts simply come up. All the conditioning thoughts, ego, all the conditioning thoughts simply come up without a you doing the thinking, and they will no longer be seen as problematic. It is just what is, complete in itself, and in no need of alteration or modification. It can also be seen that something is aware of the mind's activity. Otherwise, it could not be reported. This awareness cannot be an object to itself. It is the knowing that cannot be known, and the seeing that cannot be seen. Realizing that that is what you truly are is not an experience for someone. It is the experienceable experience. It is the experienceable experience, experiencing itself as you are that. Waiting for this to become clear is again just self-arising and spontaneous thought, which is simply the way it appears to itself, and not you not getting it. Everything is it, and you are that. It's not about something that you can put off until you die. It is what you truly are, just like the wave in the ocean are nothing but one water. This is so, even when it is expressing as an apparent separate you and everything else that appears, including stars, birds, and doubts, whether or not this is really so. As you said, nothing happens. It is as it is, and there is no need to wait for an experience. All experiences come and go, but that which is aware of them does not come and go. It is the aware space in which all arises and dissolves, just like yesterday's thoughts come up and dissolve again. There is no you that has a life to cope with. Life is simply living life, and it does it also as you. Painfulness may arise, pleasure may arise, but that in and to which it arises is the uncaused joy that knows no opposites. It is the still heart at the center of the storm. It is the self-shining mirror, unaffected by whatever is reflected in it. You are that. And then he closes with a quote. No effort is needed for that aliveness to be. Nobody is doing aliveness. Is anybody doing sitting on a chair? Thinking is oneness thinking, I don't get where this is going, or this is too simple. All is simply aliveness, oneness, being. It cannot be taught or achieved. Who is apart from being to achieve being? Who can lose or gain this when this is all there is? Resisting oneness is oneness resisting. Seeking oneness is oneness seeking itself.
Who's quote?
Tony Parsons. So again, it's the constant deconstructing of the way our mind operates in the illusory addiction to this notion of a separate self. So Ugo, do you see how he's trying to cut the root of the conditioning rather than fiddle with the conditioning itself in its many forms?
Somewhat. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot about this stuff. I don't ask too many questions because all it does, it's involving my mind to trying to find answers. And and I look at what helps me understand it is that I know that these questions come from the content of my consciousness, which is memory of experiences that are recorded in the brain. Now that's an organic physical thing that happens. Don't really know too much about it, but we experience and it's recorded in memory. And that we call consciousness is my understanding of it. And it's from that consciousness that thoughts arise, and that's where with that process, that's where the separateness comes in. Just so as I'm living the day and I catch myself, I become aware of the thinking process going on. There are times when I can just turn it off and I said, there it is. It's my conditioning that is experiencing this thought. And if I can more or less sidetrack the thinking process to being present to where I am, that thought seems to go away. And
Yes.
The hardest thing for me to really realize is that all the living that I do is always ever in the moment, right now.
Right.
That is really hard for me to really get because it's so easy to slip out of it. And then you get into the mind bullshit. The minute the mind starts going, you're out of the present, you're in the past or the future. And I understand that. And that helps me deconstruct, in a sense, this sense of my thoughts are who I am. And so I'm talking too much.
No, it's
No. So even when you find yourself, or when there's an awareness of being of the thinking, which is of the past, or the thinking, which is projecting into the future, it's really just happening in that very moment. So you're really never not present. There's always presence.
But it's being superimposed by the self, by the ego,
by the mind,
by the mind. Well, ego, mind.
Yes, it's
same thing.
Yes,
so it's not allowing that true self to be forward and present, to be present.
However, when you talk about suddenly there's an awareness of where this thinking is moving and how this thinking is moving and where it's going, that awareness has you out of the thinking, right?
Right.
And what he's saying here is that awareness is what you are.
Right. That's what I am, and that's what everything is.
That's all there is.
Yeah. Because Well, I think in a sense he's talking about experience. You can experience this in a sense when you get really deeply involved in something that's happening. There's no sense of self. You're not thinking, I'm seeing this, I'm doing this, boy, this is great, that and the other thing. It's like I get caught, and it's just you're mesmerized by what's happening. The problem is that at some point the event ends, then the mind starts to figure out, boy, that was pretty good. And it starts analyzing it. It was good, it was bad, I want more, I don't want more, and all the rest of it. And the analyzer is conditioned. So he's not going to be able to make a good recording of the event. He's going to record it by whatever conditioning he's been exposed to.
Yes, correct.
And I can't necessarily spontaneously use that in my life moment to moment, but thank God that with what we're learning and what we're discussing here and so on and so forth, I can at times be present to that.
Yes.
That gives me a lot of hope. Gives me a lot of hope. And it confirms, for me anyhow, it confirms that what I am is not what I think I am. That
Correct.
I'm on that.
Yes. Right. Yes.
Can you tell me about the phrase "I am that"? I mean, that's of course Nisargadatta is famous for saying that, but I don't think he actually ever said it. It was his editor who put the name of the book was supposed to be "I am," and the editor put that on the end of it, and of course made that phrase famous. And there's been some talk about "I am that" is in itself a dualistic. I am that versus this, it's almost dualistic. But I tend to think of it as I am that, I am the universe, I am everything,
the ultimate.
The ultimate, the absolute, yeah.
The absolute. Because Nisargadatta was always speaking from and to the absolute.
So when he was apparently he for 6 years he had a mantra almost, I am,
yes.
I am. And that led to his awakening.
Mm.
But I've tried doing that myself, saying I am, and it seems to reinforce the center.
That's right.
So, it's kind of a paradox for me.
Yeah.
There's an idea that I have that is interesting for me anyway. Maybe it will be interesting for you guys. That the objects in our consciousness, if we put them out on a table, let's say we just had a table in front of us, and everything that was on that table was the object of our consciousness. So we put like an apple on the table, and we put a plate on the table, and then we put the ego on the table, right? So the ego is now an object in our consciousness. So we experience the apple, we can slice it up, eat it, we can put it on the plate. Oh, sorry, we have a knife that we put on the table. So we take the knife, we cut the apple, we put the apple on the plate, and then there's the ego. The only time the ego is in our consciousness is when we think about it, right? In other words, it's a thought that's maintained within our consciousness. So if we take the ego off the table, there is no me, right? The me only exists when it's within the realm of consciousness. It only exists as an object within the realm of consciousness. In the same way as the apple only exists when it's in the realm of consciousness. And the ego is just this, it's just a construct that we place within the realm of consciousness. When it's not in the realm of consciousness, it doesn't exist. In those times when we're experiencing something without the ego, it's because the ego is not existing within the realm of consciousness. It's not a thought that's being perpetuated in the now of consciousness. It's not on the table. And when we have those experiences without that ego on the table, what it allows us to do is it allows us to experience the apple directly,
Mm-hmm.
allows us to experience the plate, the knife, whatever else.
Right.
You know, so Bill, when you're saying, you know, I am, what you're doing first is you're going onto the table in the as the ego. So when you say I am, you're perpetuating, you've initiated and you're perpetuating that notion of an egoic self. So when you say I am, you're saying it as the ego on the table.
It's supposed to point to my beingness.
Yeah, but
Saying
you're being
I
so
am.
when you eat the apple, right, without the ego, if you take the ego off the table and you're eating the apple there's only the apple. There's only the sweet. There was something else I came in when you were talking about the sweetness. There's the sweetness of the apple. There's the crunchiness. There's that experience of it. There's no egoic self when you're having that direct experience. It's only when you first put on the guise of the ego and then bite the apple. You use that to bite the apple. You know, that then and that's why you're having those secondary experiences. It's the Bill eating the apple. It's the Chip eating the apple.
Right. Right.
But it can just be eating apple.
Yeah.
You know, it's just sweetness. And that's why I think it was kind of brilliant. I caught that again. I thought it was brilliant the way he was saying it about the sweetness of the apple. We don't have words for the sweetness. There's no way it can ever be communicated, but we can taste it. We can have that experience of that in the now.
Yeah,
And so I just want to say, so if you remove that, if you take that ego off the realm, off the table, if it's not there, then you cannot have an egoic experience.
Bill, the expression "I am" is meant as a pointer to
That's
point you back
to
your
sense
to your
of
true nature as pure non-conceptual awareness.
Right.
Awareness, you know, it's Sat Chit Ananda. And the Sat, I believe, is consciousness bereft of concepts. So if you're, and the me, as Chip was just saying, another way I think about it is, there is no you without the movement of thought. There's no me without the movement of thought. When you sit quietly and there is no movement of thought, look and see, is there a me present in those moments? I don't think there is. And those are moments when you experience a pure non-conceptual awareness. And and your awareness is not filtered through an ego.
right. That's
Right? When my ego is on the table, as Chip was just saying,
Right.
I see everything more clearly. It's not filtered. If I pick up the ego from the table and put it back in my head, so to speak, then I see everything on the table through that ego. But
ego is thought.
yes,
That's right.
but
Thought.
the I am that that is pointing to that which sees, that which hears, that which is
The absolute.
the absolute, not the absolute subjective awareness.
Right.
And of course, it's the closing line of a very famous part of I forget which Upanishad, but after you come to see clearly, the guru says, "Tat Svamasi, you are that." When everything else, neti, take away everything. You know, like Krishnamurti says, negate
Yes.
everything. When you negate all the content of your consciousness, what you're left with is your true, undivided, non-separated, non-dual, pure subjectivity. And Leo is trying to point you to that by constantly deconstructing this sense of me.
So that you get to a place where even the ego, the sense of a me, is just another object in consciousness.
So if I'm sitting by my pool and there's no movement of thought, I'm having a nice present moment experience as present awareness. And then if I happen to look over and see that my petunias are wilting, right? Then thought may come in and say, oh, they need water. And that's an okay use of the function of thinking, which is part of consciousness. But if I look at the petunias and I say, how could you have done this? You didn't remember to water the plants. You don't remember anything. You figure, and I start a self-condemnation. Obviously, that's the me at work.
Yeah. But this movement of thought, it's always with us. I mean, there's always movement of thought. We can never make ourselves blank. But when we start to have preferences, that's when we are starting to have duality and experiencing suffering in a sense.
Well, the movement of thought as an aspect of consciousness to help me function in my life is one thing.
Right.
But it's the movement of thought as a manifestation of this ego, this sense of separate identity that is the mischief maker.
Right.
Thought is just another capacity of consciousness, another quality of consciousness. Cognizing ability.
Yeah, thought.
It seems the circulating thoughts, they're always circulating the same old stuff over and over and over again.
Thinking.
As you start to, have more of an awareness of that, maybe you can slow that down a bit. Not if you try to slow it down, you're lost.
No.
As a natural sort of function of observing and being aware of that, they sort of in a way dissolve. But you never ever get rid of those thoughts. In my experience, they just keep coming over and over again.
Well, they may come less frequently, and when they do come, you have less interest in them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the qualitative shift. You're less interested in them. The center of your being shifts from the content of consciousness to the context, so to speak, to the background.
To the background.
A lot of my problems with the thought thing comes up when the thought comes up, but then it conflicts with reality, and I don't want to, and I don't want to accept it. In other words, it's a thought that I don't want. It causes me conflict, internal conflict, and what I'm becoming better at recognizing that. And once I realize that it's my contradiction, it's me that's creating the upset from the thought, it kind of depowers it. Evelyn, it kind of sticks a pin in it.
That's right.
And it really does depower it.
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of it. You can't get rid of thoughts. You have to figure out a way of handling them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the split mind. That's the ego seeing the ego. And that's that's the conflict.
Right.
However, it's awareness that shines the spotlight on that happening. It's that happening. And there's an awareness of that happening. And once there is that light of awareness, that happening begins to dissolve. Because then you see, it's me doing me. It's me fighting me. That's what the conflict is.
It's like trying to change the past.
Right.
By trying to change anything, you use the word resistance.
Yep.
The resistance is the me.
Yep. That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah. You know this the snake, the rope that you think is a snake. You know that Ira talks about. That's that
Yeah.
story that you see something and you jump back and because you thought it was a snake and it's actually a rope.
Right.
It's that hook that we have into our ego, where we think we're the ego.
Yes.
So we're actually thinking that we're the ego, and as a result of it, we keep enlivening the ego.
Yes.
Somebody says something to us, we take
Absolutely.
an exception to it, we
Right.
get pissed off, we're insulted, we're disrespected, we're angry, whatever these things are.
Sure.
But once we recognize that we're not the ego, that it's just basically like a piece of rope, all of a sudden we have independence from that.
Right.
So
Mhm.
we're not acting, we don't need to act through the ego
Right.
Mhm.
in the same way as we don't need to act through the rope.
Right.
Right.
We're independent of it. And I
Right.
think the thing with they have this word called vritti, the thought waves of the mind, VRITTI,
Mhm.
and they so there are thought waves of the mind that are going to be egoic, and then there are thought waves of the mind that are not egoic. They're just simply aspects of creation, and it's the egoic ones where we've basically taken on that personage of ego and we act through that. And then there are the other ones where we're not acting through the ego, where we're simply just experiencing the thought. We're experiencing thought, whether and those thought waves of the mind include perception. There's like
Mm.
there's right perception, wrong perception,
Mm.
imagination,
Mm.
dreamless sleep, memory is one of the vrittis. So I think it's the separation from those thought waves and recognizing that's not
Mm.
who we are. We're not the rope, we're not the
Yeah.
ego. We're simply the awareness or the background in which these thought waves
Appear.
appear. Thank you, Evelyn. That was exactly the word I was looking for.
Okay, well, we're gonna leave it there for tonight.
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
see
you all so much.
Yeah, see
Thank
everybody next week.
Thank you very much.
Buonasera.
Bye, everyone.
Good night. Buonasera.
Buonasera.